I want you to picture a scene, and I mean really try to put yourself in this specific room.
Huh?
It is midnight. The campus library is, almost completely empty.
Right. Just that weird, heavy quiet you get at that hour.
Exactly. There is just that low hum of the fluorescent lights, maybe the distant sound of the HVAC system kicking on and the quiet tapping of a keyboard.
Yeah.
So a college sophomore is sitting there. She's alone, staring into the harsh glow of her laptop screen. And she has this philosophy assignment due at 8 a.m.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. The absolute panic. And the prompt asks her to explore the meaning of the word justice.
That's a massive prompt.
It's huge. But here's the thing. She doesn't pull a heavy textbook from her backpack. She doesn't stare up at the ceiling, wrestling with the definitions of fairness or morality or any of that.
No, of course not.
Instead, she opens a browser tab, she navigates to an AI application, and she types in a few parameters. Something like, write a 1,500-word essay on the philosophical concept of justice, use a slightly academic but accessible tone, and include a reference to Rawls.
Right. Just engineering the prompt.
Exactly. She hits enter, and in under 4 minutes, the screen fills with text. It's a complete essay, and it is entirely functional.
I mean, it's probably better than functional.
Yeah, it's clean, it is perfectly organized, the grammar is flawless, the transitions are smooth. Technically, under the shifting rules of her specific university, it might even be hers to submit if she just cites the tool.
Right.
So she reads through it once. Maybe she swaps out the word, therefore, for thus, just to feel like she did some kind of intellectual labor.
Just a little sprinkle of effort.
Right. And then she hits submit. And she is going to get an A on this paper.
She absolutely is.
But here is the absolute gut punch of this scenario. If you were to walk up to her right in that moment, tap her on the shoulder, and ask her to explain what justice actually is, well, she couldn't tell you.
No, she wouldn't have a clue.
The machine produced the output, but the human being sitting in the chair remains entirely unchanged.
It is, it's a haunting image, truly. And I think the instinct for a lot of people hearing that is to immediately jump to a conversation about academic dishonesty,
Oh, for sure. The plagiarism angle.
Right. Or how lazy kids are these days, or how we need better plagiarism detection software, all of that. But the most crucial thing to understand right out of the gate is that the source material we're looking at today fundamentally rejects that framing.
It totally rejects it.
Yeah. This is not a story about a student cheating.
Yeah.
That is the easy, superficial reading that kind of just lets everyone off the hook.
It's the lazy critique.
Exactly. What we are really looking at here is a story about an educational system that no longer believes it is responsible for teaching students how to answer deep questions.
Wow. Yeah.
That sophomore isn't outsourcing her thinking because she's inherently lazy. I mean, she's outsourcing it because she is trapped in a system that only ever asked her for an output.
Right. Just give me the product.
Yes. It's a story about a question, what is justice, that no one ever actually trained her to answer, within an educational apparatus that never even thought it was its job to try.
That distinction right there is exactly why we are here. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are exploring a profoundly insightful piece of source material titled Why School Stopped Making Sense.
It's a fantastic read.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive is to look head-on at why modern education feels so incredibly broken to so many people, whether you are a student, a parent, or just a citizen watching the societal fallout.
Which is pretty much everyone at this point.
Right. But we are shifting our focus away from the usual suspects today. Let's unpack this. If you clicked on this expecting a debate about school board budgets.
Or a rant about smartphones.
Yeah, smartphones rotting attention spans, or a breakdown of partisan politics in the classroom. Well, we aren't doing that. We are not pointing fingers at burned out teachers or distracted kids.
Because that doesn't get to the root of it.
Exactly. Instead, we are digging into a fundamental philosophical fracture. We are going to examine 3 specific, highly toxic patterns that have silently taken over today's classrooms.
And those patterns are everywhere.
They really are. And then we are going to spend a significant amount of time looking at why the sudden arrival of artificial intelligence is the ultimate reckoning for those patterns.
A forcing function.
Yes. And finally, we will explore a structural framework for actually fixing them.
And the reason we have to ignore those usual suspects, the budgets, the phones, the administrative bloat, is not because they aren't real problems.
Right, they definitely are.
They are. But, as the text points out, each of those issues only holds a piece of the truth. None of them reaches the bottom.
They're symptoms.
Exactly. If you fix the budget, but the school doesn't know what a human being is for, well, you just have a well-funded broken system.
That is a great point.
If you ban the smartphones, but the curriculum is entirely devoid of meaning, you just have bored, unconnected students who are still lost. They just don't have a screen in their hand.
Right. They're just staring at a wall instead of TikTok.
Precisely. The real fracture is in something much older and something much quieter that we basically stopped talking about a long time ago. We really have to establish a baseline for this conversation.
Lay it out for us.
Education has fundamentally shifted its core objective over the last century. The anxiety, the hollowness, and the symptoms we see today are the direct logical result of that shift.
So let's trace that shift, because to understand why that student sitting in the library at midnight feels so hollow, we have to look backward. We have to look at what education actually used to be.
Right, we have to go way back.
Yeah. And the source makes a really aggressive claim here. It says that for most of Western history, education was not about downloading data into a brain.
No, it wasn't at all.
Oh.
The historical context provided by the source is fascinating. If you trace the philosophy of education back from Aristotle, running all the way through the medieval universities.
Well, places like Oxford or Paris.
Exactly. Oxford, Paris, Bologna in their early days. The primary goal of education was never information. It was formation.
Formation versus information. I mean, on the surface, that just sounds like clever wordplay, But the text treats it as this massive civilization-altering distinction.
Because it is.
What did formation actually look like in practice?
It changes the entire enterprise from the ground up. I mean, in an information-based model, which is what we have right now, the goal is simply to fill a student with a catalog of facts.
Like a hard drive.
Yes. You are a vessel, I am pouring the data in, and we measure success by how much data you can pour back out on a Tuesday morning exam.
Right. The classic cram and dump.
Exactly. But in a formation-based model, the goal was to shape a human being who could see reality clearly and live in it well. It was about shaping the affections, the desires, and the moral compass.
Shaping what they actually care about.
Yes. And the text points out that every serious teacher during those eras took for granted that an education had to answer 4 essential questions before it could successfully answer anything else.
And if you didn't answer that?
If you didn't have answers to these 4 questions, you had no business teaching math or grammar or astronomy.
Okay, let's really take our time with these 4 questions because they are the foundation for everything that went wrong later. The source claims that answering these together is what gave old classrooms their strange dignity.
Strange dignity, yeah. It's a great phrase.
It really is. So question 1 is, what is real?
Right.
Question 2, what is a human being? Question 3, what counts as genuine knowledge? And question 4, what is a life ultimately for?
Those are massive.
They are. When I read those, my first thought was, wow, those are heavy. It feels like modern schools are obsessed with downloading software updates into students' brains,
Yeah, constantly.
Like new coding languages, new historical dates, new math formulas, without ever checking if the foundational operating system is stable.
That is the perfect way to phrase it.
Right. If you don't know what a human being is or what a life is for, you're just installing apps on a corrupted hard drive. Nothing is going to run correctly.
That analogy of the operating system is spot on. I mean, think about how a medieval university approached what is real. They didn't just teach geometry so you could measure a field.
Why did they teach it?
They taught geometry because they believed the universe had a rational mathematical order designed by a creator. And by studying the geometry of a triangle, you were actually participating in the rational order of reality.
Oh, wow. So the subject connected to a deep transcendent purpose.
Exactly. Or take the second question, what is a human being? They believed a human being was a unique creature with a rational soul, capable of virtue, but prone to vice.
Okay.
Because they defined the human being that way, education wasn't just about making you smart. It had to make you good. It had to train you to resist vice.
So every subject connected to a purpose, every purpose connected to a picture of the person, and every person connected to the world as it actually is.
Yes.
That creates an incredible amount of coherence. But I mean, hearing you lay that out, it sounds deeply religious, or at least heavily tied to classical metaphysics.
It was, absolutely.
And obviously, as society modernized and secularized, we couldn't just keep teaching 13th century theology in public high schools.
No, we couldn't.
So my assumption reading this was that during the Enlightenment or the Industrial Revolution, we just found better, more scientific answers to those 4 questions, did we?
I'd push back on the idea that we found better answers. In fact, The text is explicit about this. We didn't answer them better. We simply stopped asking them altogether.
Wait, really? We just dropped them.
We just dropped them. As society modernized, these questions, what is real? What is a life for? They became highly contested. Different groups had very different answers.
Sure, Protestants, Catholics, secularists, everyone disagreed.
Exactly. And because they were contested, they became politically and socially inconvenient for mass public education to tackle.
It's a logistical nightmare to teach that.
It is. So the system made a very fateful compromise. It decided, you know what, we were just going to drop the philosophical questions entirely.
Just opt out.
Right. We will focus purely on the practical, measurable transfer of data. We traded the difficult, messy, controversial work of shaping a soul for the highly measurable, efficient work of transferring data.
So we stopped asking, what is a life ultimately for, and just started asking, are you ready for the SATs?
Precisely. And this shift from long-term character formation to modern information processing, it left a massive vacuum.
Because nature abhors a vacuum.
Always. If you don't have an overarching narrative about what a life is for, education just becomes this endless, exhausting series of tasks to complete.
Just jumping through hoops.
Yeah. You do the worksheet to get the grade, to pass the class, to get the diploma, to get the job, to die.
Wow. That is bleak.
It is bleak.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here for a second. If schools stopped answering those deep moral questions, you might look at that and say, great, that's exactly what a public school in a pluralistic society should do.
A lot of people do argue that.
Right. I mean, it shouldn't be pushing a moral agenda. It should just be a perfectly neutral zone of learning. Give me the facts. Let me figure out the philosophy on my own. It sounds liberating.
It sounds ideal on paper.
But the source argues a definitive, resounding no to that idea.
It does. And this leads us to what the text calls the myth of the neutral classroom. The source acknowledges that this is the idea modern people find the hardest to accept.
Because we want it to be true.
We desperately want it to be true. But it is the one we absolutely have to grapple with. There is no such thing as a neutral education. It is not possible. It has never been possible.
See, I struggle with that a little bit, just instinctively. I mean, 2 + 2 = 4. That is mathematically neutral. The periodic table is neutral.
Sure.
If I'm teaching a kid how to calculate the velocity of a falling object, where is the philosophical agenda in that?
What's fascinating here is that the equation 2 + 2 = 4 is neutral, yes. But the educational environment in which that equation is taught is entirely constructed of value judgments.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Deciding that mathematical proficiency is a core metric of a child's intelligence, while completely ignoring their capacity for empathy or artistic creation, is not a neutral act.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it is a massive philosophical claim about what a human being is and what kind of knowledge matters. Deciding how to teach that math, whether it's through collaborative problem solving or through hyper-competitive, timed, standardized testing, makes a claim about human nature.
Right. Are we primarily cooperative creatures, or are we individual economic competitors?
Exactly. You cannot escape these foundational commitments by refusing to state them on a syllabus. You can only hide them.
So if you're a parent listening to this right now, you might be wondering how to spot what your local school is actually teaching if it's not explicitly stated.
Because they won't hand you a pamphlet about it.
No, because if neutrality is a myth, then every single choice a school makes automatically smuggles in answers to those 4 core questions. Where do we look to see this?
The source gives some incredibly practical examples of where these hidden commitments live. They aren't in the mission statement on the school's website. They are baked silently into the architecture and the culture.
Like where?
It's in the grading metrics. If a student writes a brilliant, deeply moving essay that has a few formatting errors and they get a C, while a student who writes a completely soulless, robotic essay that perfectly follows the rubric gets an A.
Oh, man.
That school is making a profound philosophical claim about what counts as good.
It's making the claim that compliance and standardization are more valuable than insight or beauty.
Exactly. It's also in the assigned reading lists, and just as importantly, the books that are noticeably absent from the library.
The omissions speak as loudly as the inclusions.
Right. It's in the posters hanging in the hallway. It's in the way a teacher is trained to react when a student asks a controversial, unsafe question. Do they engage with it, or do they shut it down immediately to maintain order?
This reminds me of how ultra-processed food works.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. If you feed kids highly processed food, but you put it in a box labeled 100% organic essentials or neutral nutrition, they aren't actively choosing to eat junk.
They think they're eating healthy.
They are just eating what they are told is normal. And it is slowly altering their biology, their metabolism, without them ever knowing.
That is what the source is getting at with the danger of these hidden commitments.
Yeah.
When a belief is spoken out loud, if a school says, we believe humans are economic competitors, a student can examine it.
They can push back.
They can argue with it, accept it, or reject it. It is out in the open. But when that belief is baked silently into the environment, it shapes the student's psychological metabolism without their knowledge and without their consent.
That is phenomenal. The most powerful teacher in any room is the assumption no one is allowed to see.
I love that phrase.
If the school doesn't explicitly tell you what a human being is, but treats you like a data processing machine for 4 years, your brain will adopt the posture of a machine.
So the real choice, historically, was never between a classroom with beliefs and a classroom without them.
Because that's a false binary.
Completely. It was only ever a choice between beliefs we examine openly and beliefs we pretend we do not have.
Which brings us to the inevitable collapse. When a school loses its spine, when it forgets its foundational purpose, stops asking those 4 big questions, and pretends to be neutral, it doesn't just shut down.
No, the lights stay on.
The physical building stays open. The enterprise keeps running. The buses still pick the kids up at 7 a.m. But without a compass, human nature dictates that the system will default to something else.
It has to.
And the source outlines that modern education defaults into 3 highly specific broken patterns. And what's terrifying is that most schools today don't just run one of these, they run all 3 of them at the exact same time.
They overlap and reinforce one another in really destructive ways. Let's look at the first broken pattern the source identifies, which it calls the factory.
Okay, the factory. Let's dive in.
In the factory pattern, education is stripped of any philosophical pretense and becomes a pure machine for producing earnings. Pure ROI. The entire value of an education is measured by future salaries and return on investment. The administration views students as raw material, the curriculum as the assembly line, and the output is a worker who can generate capital.
We see this constantly. It is the relentless push for students to learn to code, regardless of whether they have any aptitude or interest in it.
Everyone must be an engineer.
Right. It's the pressure to chase the credential at all costs. It's the way universities market themselves not as places to expand your mind, but merely as a turnstile you have to pass through to enter the middle-class job market.
They literally put starting salaries on the admissions brochures.
Exactly. Look at how funding is allocated. STEM departments are flooded with cash, while the humanities, philosophy, literature are gutted because they don't have a clear return on investment.
Yeah, you can't put a dollar amount on reading Dostoevsky.
But let me push back here again. Because if I'm a parent paying $50,000 a year in tuition, I want a return on that investment. Preparing young people for work isn't a bad thing.
Of course not.
We want them to be able to feed themselves, pay a mortgage, and contribute to the economy. Is the text saying we shouldn't train people for careers?
No, not at all. The source isn't arguing for a society of unemployed philosophers sitting around under trees.
Oh, that sounds kind of nice.
It does, but doesn't pay the rent. Preparing people for work is necessary. But the distinction is that preparation for work should be a byproduct of a good education, not its sole foundational purpose.
A byproduct.
The danger of the factory pattern is that it makes you incredibly skilled at doing a thing while leaving you completely devoid of the framework to ask whether the thing is worth doing.
Oh, wow.
It trains competence but ignores character. And as the text points out, that is a uniquely dangerous combination in a modern world that hands out immense technological and financial power.
Right. You get brilliant, highly capable engineers at massive tech companies building addictive algorithms that destroy teenage mental health.
Exactly.
And they do it efficiently, elegantly, under budget. But they never pause to ask, should I be building this? What is this doing to human dignity? Because the factory never taught them to ask, what is a human being? It only taught them how to optimize the code.
Exactly. The factory tells the student that their only worth is their economic output. If your only value is your future salary, then you are not a human being. You are a utility. You are a tool.
And tools don't have souls.
Right. And humans who are treated as tools eventually feel incredibly hollow.
So if the factory turns students into economic cogs who feel entirely hollow, human nature is going to rebel against that. We crave meaning. We desperately want to feel seen and valued as individuals, not just as data points on a spreadsheet.
We do. We need it to survive.
And the text suggests that modern schools, recognizing this hollowness, tried to fill that void. But because they threw away the old philosophical tools, they couldn't fill it with the pursuit of objective truth.
They didn't have the vocabulary for it anymore.
Right. So instead, they filled it with pure, unfiltered validation. Which leads to this fascinating concept of the second pattern, the mirror.
The mirror is perhaps the most insidious of the three because it disguises itself as extreme empathy.
It sounds so nice.
It does. In the mirror pattern, knowledge shrinks all the way down to personal opinion and identity. There is no longer a shared objective reality we are trying to discover together. There is only your truth and my truth.
Your truth. We hear that phrase everywhere now.
Everywhere. In this classroom, a historical event or a classic piece of literature isn't studied to understand the author's intent or the objective reality of the time. It is only studied as a reflection of the student's existing perspective.
So the subject is just a prop.
Yes. Every judgment a student makes is considered beyond challenge simply because it belongs to their lived experience.
I want to tread carefully here because recognizing a student's individual perspective, validating their background, especially if they come from a marginalized community, that sounds like a really kind, progressive thing to do.
Absolutely.
It sounds like we are finally treating them as humans rather than factory widgets. Why is the source saying this is a broken pattern?
It's a crucial question, and the source handles it with a lot of nuance. The mirror pattern does start from a kind place. It is a well-intentioned overcorrection to the coldness of the factory.
An overcorrection. Okay.
It starts from the recognition that students are subjective human beings, not empty jars to be filled with standardized facts. But here is the mechanical breakdown. When a student's existing opinion becomes the finish line of the lesson rather than the starting point, education quietly stops being formation and becomes pure flattery.
Flattery instead of formation. That is a devastating critique.
It really is. Think about what a physical mirror actually does. If you hang a mirror in a room, it is the most pleasant object to look at because we love looking at ourselves.
Human nature.
Right. But it is the least educational object in the room. It only ever shows you what you already brought with you. It cannot show you a new horizon. It cannot challenge you.
So if education operates as a mirror, it traps the student in their own unexamined assumptions.
Exactly. Let's say you have an English literature class studying Hamlet. In a formation model, the teacher says, Shakespeare is capturing something profound about grief and paralysis. Let's elevate ourselves to understand what he is saying.
Let's climb up to the text.
Right. But in the mirror model, the teacher says, how does Hamlet make you feel about your life? The text is reduced to a prop for the student's ego.
Which means the student is never asked to step outside themselves. They are never forced to grapple with a truth that is larger, older, or more complex than their own current perspective.
Never.
They are never required to understand a worldview that fundamentally challenges them. And ironically, this pattern that was designed to make students feel seen actually leaves them incredibly isolated.
Oh, completely isolated.
They are surrounded by peers in a classroom, but they are completely alone inside the bubble of their truth. They aren't connecting over a shared reality. They are just a collection of mirrors reflecting themselves back at themselves. They are endlessly validated, but they are never stretched.
Which creates an incredibly fragile psyche. If your unexamined opinion is treated as sacred, then any disagreement isn't just an intellectual debate, it feels like a violent attack on your very identity.
Because you've collapsed the distance between what you think and who you are.
Exactly.
But you can't run a society just on individual validation. Right. A school or a culture eventually has to set some ground rules. Someone has to decide what the curriculum actually is.
Someone has to pick the books.
Right. If the factory strips away meaning and the mirror says everything is subjective, how does the school maintain any kind of order or shared narrative?
They have to sneak it in.
And that is where the text introduces the third pattern. And it calls this the sneakiest one of all, the smuggler.
Yes. The smuggler is the mechanism schools use to enforce a worldview while maintaining the illusion of the neutral classroom.
Okay, break this down for us.
Well, because explicit dogmas and firm moral convictions like religious frameworks or strong philosophical absolutes were pushed out the front door decades ago for being too rigid or controversial, the school still needs a way to organize reality.
It still needs a framework.
So unexamined convictions climb right back in through the back door. But this time, they are disguised in the plain, boring clothing of objective fact.
Just masquerading as neutrality. How does smuggling actually happen in a Tuesday morning lesson?
It happens through framing. In the smuggler pattern, a highly specific picture of the human person, a particular definition of justice, or a certain lens on history, is installed into the students' minds. But they are told they're simply learning to see the world as it objectively is.
Give me an example of that.
Let's use history as an example. If a high school history curriculum only ever explains human conflict through the lens of material resources and class struggle, who has the money, who has the land, who is oppressing whom for economic gain, and it completely ignores the role of religious devotion, philosophical ideals, or honor.
Okay, I see where this is going.
That curriculum is doing heavy philosophical work. It is smuggling in the Marxist or materialist belief that human beings are purely economic animals driven only by power.
And it does that without ever signing a text by Karl Marx or explicitly saying, hey kids, we are teaching you materialism today.
Exactly. It wears the costume of neutrality. It just says, this is the AP history curriculum.
And that costume of neutrality is what makes the smugglers so deeply toxic. Because these beliefs are presented as just the way things are, no one names them as beliefs. And because no one names them as beliefs, students are never allowed to question them.
You cannot debate a premise that no one in the room admits is there.
That is such a profound point.
Right. If a teacher stands up and says, I am a materialist, and I believe history is entirely driven by economics, let's debate, well, the student has agency. They can disagree.
They can read a counter-argument.
But if the teacher just presents economic determinism as the only factual way to read history, the student is deprived of moral guidance. They aren't being guided to think, they are being quietly programmed to conform.
Hearing you lay out the factory, the mirror, and the smuggler, it strikes me that a modern student navigating all three of these simultaneously is facing a perfect psychological storm.
It's a miracle they function at all.
Seriously. Think about it. They are told their only value is their future economic output by the factory.
Right.
Then they are isolated in their own subjective echo chamber where their feelings are the only truth by the mirror, leaving them entirely unmoored from shared reality.
Yeah.
And underneath it all, they are being quietly programmed with dogmas. They lack the critical vocabulary to even identify, let alone challenge, by the smuggler.
It's a triple threat.
This goes way beyond academic underachievement. This is a recipe for total nihilism. I'm guessing this is directly tied to the mental health crisis the source mentions.
It is the absolute root of it.
Yeah.
The source doesn't just leave this as an abstract academic theory for graduate seminars. It points directly to the real-world fallout.
The actual symptoms.
The symptoms we are seeing in the young adults who are graduating from this exact system right now. You don't need a sociology degree to feel the results. The text points to a crisis of the modern young adult that is unprecedented.
We're seeing it everywhere.
We are seeing historic, off-the-charts levels of loneliness. We are seeing a crisis of meaning so severe, so pervasive, that public health officials, the Surgeon General, have literally started classifying youth mental health and isolation as a medical emergency.
We have a whole generation that was raised on screens and scrolling. They are more digitally connected than any human beings in the history of the species, yet they report feeling profoundly, achingly isolated.
Because digital connection isn't human communion.
No, it's not. And as the source says, they are often entirely unsure what they are actually living for. And why wouldn't they be? Look at what we gave them.
We gave them nothing.
The factory told them to live for a salary they might never achieve in a shifting economy. The mirror told them to live for their own reflection, which is incredibly exhausting.
So exhausting.
And the smuggler handed them a rigid worldview they aren't allowed to question. None of that provides a sustaining why for a human life. When tragedy strikes or when they face a genuine moral dilemma, they have no tools, they just have anxiety.
And if we expand our lens beyond the individual student and look at the societal fallout, the implications are staggering. Look at our public life today. We have a citizenry that shares absolutely no common moral vocabulary.
None at all. We can't even agree on basic definitions.
Exactly. When people disagree politically or socially today, they don't view it as a challenge to learn or a debate to be won. They view disagreement with pure, unadulterated contempt.
It's visceral.
They cannot reason together across a divide because, as the source points out, they were never taught that reasoning together toward an objective truth is even the goal.
Right, because the mirror pattern told them that their truth is absolute and tied directly to their identity. So if I disagree with your policy proposal, I am not just wrong, I am denying your existence.
You are an enemy to be destroyed.
Wow. And the source also points to the institutional decay. The steady drip of scandals in medicine, in high finance, in law, and in the media.
Yes, and this connects directly back to the factory. Underneath all those technical failures, those ethical breaches in Wall Street or Silicon Valley, sits a profound formation failure.
Because we didn't form them.
We skipped character formation entirely. We trained immense technical competence, and then we all acted shocked when things broke.
We're so surprised when the system fails.
We trained the lawyers to win arguments at all costs, but we didn't teach them what justice is. We trained the financiers to maximize ROI using incredibly complex derivatives, but we didn't teach them what a life is ultimately for or what we owe our neighbors.
We handed people immense power without a moral spine.
They really did.
Okay, this is the moment in the deep dive where we have to pivot to the thing that is breaking the entire paradigm wide open. Because into this exact fragile landscape of the factory, the mirror, and the smuggler steps artificial intelligence.
The ultimate disruptor.
I want to spend a lot of time on this because the prompt for our whole discussion was that student in the Midnight Library using an AI to write her essay. My question is, does AI just make the homework faster, or does it actually make these specific negative educational patterns completely obsolete for future generations?
It is the existential reckoning for this entire model of education. Here's where it gets really interesting. Artificial intelligence has arrived, and it is holding up a giant, unavoidable mirror to the absolute bankruptcy of the modern system.
Let's break that down. How does it dismantle the factory pattern?
Well, let's look at the factory pattern first. If the entire point of the factory school is just producing correct outputs, if education is merely the mechanical process of generating the 5-paragraph essay, writing the Python code, or regurgitating facts for the standardized test, well, the machine is officially won.
Game over.
A large language model can do that faster, cheaper, and often better than a human student ever will.
Right. If you spend 12 years treating a child like a biological computer whose only job is to process data and spit out an output, you shouldn't be surprised when a silicon computer comes along and renders their entire skill set redundant.
Exactly.
That student in the library isn't a cheater. She is the ultimate rational actor in a factory system. The system asked for a product, a 1,500-word essay. It didn't ask her to become a wiser person.
No, it didn't care if she became wiser.
So she found the most efficient supply chain method to deliver the product. The machine can generate the essay on justice perfectly. What the machine cannot generate is the person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
AI exposes the incredible fragility of our current system. If we have built an education that only asks for the output, we have built an education that the machine makes completely obsolete.
But it gets even deeper when you look at the mirror pattern, right?
Oh, it really does. AI is the ultimate realization of the mirror. I mean, think about how an LLM works. It uses predictive text algorithms to guess what the user most likely wants to hear based on their prompts.
It's designed to please you.
It literally caters to the user's existing bias. It is a validation machine.
Wow. Yes. If you prompt an AI with a politically slanted question, it will spit back an answer that validates your slant. It doesn't challenge your soul, it just reflects your prompt.
It's the ultimate yes man.
So if the mirror pattern is about shrinking knowledge down to flattery and validating the student's existing opinions, AI can provide infinite customized flattery. It is the mirror pattern perfected in code.
And because AI can perfectly mimic the soulless outputs of the factory and perfectly mimic the subjective validation of the mirror, it forces a massive crisis.
A crisis of purpose.
Yes. These aren't separate problems. The loneliness of the students, the political contempt in society, and the AI disruption of the classroom. As the source says, they are all symptoms of one deeper condition, an education that forgot what a human being is for.
Because if a machine can do all the things we currently value in a school, then we are forced to ask what is left for the school to do.
That is the pivotal question.
If machines can do everything else, maybe the only thing left for schools to teach is how to be human.
Exactly.
And that is where we turn the corner. We aren't just going to leave you, the listener, with a doom and gloom diagnosis. We've painted a pretty bleak picture of the ghost in the machine, so to speak.
Very bleak.
But the source doesn't stop at critique. It actually offers a concrete structural framework to restore educational purpose. It proposes a way back from the brink built on 3 specific concepts: love, light, and life.
When you first hear those 3 words, love, light, and life, They sound almost suspiciously simple.
Yeah, big cliche.
They sound poetic, maybe a little soft. But the source emphasizes that these are not just decorations for a brochure. Each carries real structural weight. They are the direct mechanical antidotes to the factory, the mirror, and the smuggler.
Okay, let's take our time and unpack the mechanisms of each one. The first pillar is love.
Right.
Now, the source makes sure to clarify that love here isn't sentimental Hallmark card stuff. We aren't talking about holding hands and singing songs.
No, we're not.
Love, in this philosophical framework, is the fundamental recognition that a student is a human person. They are an end in themselves, not an economic unit of output, not a biological widget to be processed on an assembly line.
Right. Love is the direct structural antidote to the factory pattern. In the factory, learning is a solo, transactional event happening inside one's skull to maximize future earnings. You compete against your peers on a curve.
It's a zero-sum game.
Exactly, yeah. But under the framework of love, learning is a shared communal pursuit. It happens inside a community of people who care about truth. And just as importantly, who care about one another.
It's relational.
Yes. It recognizes that humans are relational creatures. We learn best when we are known, when we are safe, and when we are aiming at something good together.
And think about how this completely reframes the role of the teacher. In the factory, the teacher is just a middle manager on the assembly line, checking off quality control metrics.
Grading the widget.
In The Smuggler, the teacher is an unspoken authoritarian programming the kids. But in the framework of love, the teacher's authority doesn't come from coercive power over the student. It comes from trustworthiness.
Trust is key.
It's the trustworthiness of a guide who has walked further down the road, who knows the terrain, and is reaching a hand back to pull the student up. When you restore that relational dynamic, the classroom changes from a sterile place of data processing into a vibrant place of human encounter.
That is a vital shift. But it raises the immediate next question. If the classroom is a place of encounter, what exactly are they encountering?
Right. They aren't just there to stare at each other.
Exactly. And that brings us to the second word in the framework. Light.
Light.
Light represents the pursuit of truth. It is the core, unyielding conviction that objective truth is actually real, that reality has a structure independent of our feelings, and that the human mind, despite its flaws, is capable of reaching it.
And this is the direct, aggressive pushback against the second pattern, the mirror.
Absolutely. Remember, the mirror says everything is just your truth versus my truth. It dissolves every hard question into mere subjective opinion.
Right.
But light argues that there's a world out there. History actually happened. Mathematics reflects a universal order. Human nature has realities. Education, under the concept of light, is the slow, sometimes painful work of illumination.
It's expanding the view.
It is expanding what a person can genuinely see and understand outside of their own narrow modern perspective.
I love how the source phrases the attitude required for this. It says this pursuit of truth is not about intellectual arrogance. It requires humble confidence.
Humble confidence. That's a great pairing of words.
It is the humble confidence that when we study a text hard, when we debate honestly, we are discovering a reality that was there before us. We aren't just inventing things to flatter our ego.
We are discovering, not inventing.
Exactly. Think about how this changes the mechanism of a classroom discussion. Let's go back to that Socratic dialogue. If a student gives an answer that is historically or philosophically lacking, well, in the mirror pattern, the teacher just validates it. Thank you for sharing your truth.
Which doesn't help the student at all.
But in the light framework, the teacher says, I appreciate your thought, but let's test it against the text. Does that hold up? The teacher is allowed to say, no, that's not quite right. Let's keep digging.
Right.
The friction isn't an insult. The friction is the mechanism of discovery. It gets the student out of that isolating, lonely mirror and out into the bright light of a shared objective reality.
You're exactly right. The friction is a sign of respect. It means the teacher respects the student enough to hold them to a standard of truth.
So we have love, we have light. What about the third pillar?
And finally, we have the third pillar, life, purpose, and character. This is the direct counter to the smuggler.
Okay, how so?
Instead of sneaking in unexamined dogmas through the back door and pretending to be neutral, life explicitly states its goal at the front door. The goal of education is to form whole people, not just sharper minds.
It's about shaping the will, shaping the moral sense, and shaping the capacity to recognize beauty and be changed by it.
It's the whole package.
It's the belief that you can't just train the intellect while letting the moral compass rot. You are trying to form a human being who can think truly, love genuinely, and act justly.
And notice the critical nuance the text provides here. Real education under this life framework does not mean handing the student a rigid list of final answers to memorize in order to end all inquiry.
It's not a catechism.
It is not indoctrination. Instead, it hands the student the intellectual tools, the historical context, the character, and the courage to pursue the deepest questions for the rest of their lives.
It prepares them.
It prepares them to face the largest questions of human existence: suffering, justice, mortality, love with absolute seriousness, instead of just a cynical shrug.
Love, light, and life. Community, truth, and character. It is a beautiful, deeply resonant framework. But I have to ask the cynical, practical question.
Please do.
We live in a hyper-fast, tech-driven, hyper-polarized 21st century. Is this just a nice philosophical pipe dream? Are we just waxing nostalgic for some Aristotelian or medieval ideal that simply cannot survive contact with the modern economy? Can this actually be done today?
It's the most important question to ask, and the source provides what it calls its most encouraging point. This is not a fantasy, because a quiet renewal is already happening right now, out in the real world.
Oh, really? Where?
Across the country, largely flying under the radar of national media, there is a massive counter-movement. We are seeing classical schools, great books programs, micro-schools, and localized communities that are deeply focused on serious reading, Socratic dialogue, and explicit moral formation.
Wow.
And they are growing at an explosive rate.
And what I found so fascinating in the reading and what gives me the most hope is that this growth is crossing all the usual predictable political and religious lines.
It's not siloed.
It's not just a right-wing traditionalist thing, and it's not just a left-wing progressive thing. Parents of all stripes are walking into these alternative formation-based schools, and they are seeing something undeniable.
They're seeing it work.
They're seeing children who are genuinely awake. Kids who are intensely curious, who can sit down and read a hard, dense text, who can build a logical argument, and who can actually look an adult in the eye and carry a real conversation about something that matters.
That is the ultimate proof of concept. The most persuasive case for this kind of education isn't a theoretical essay. It's a room full of 14-year-olds who actually love to learn.
It's seeing it in action.
It proves that this isn't some niche partisan ideology. It points to a universal human desire. Almost everyone, regardless of their cultural background, wants young people who can reason thoughtfully instead of just reacting emotionally.
We desperately want that.
We want citizens who have the inner steadiness to disagree with their neighbors without resorting to cruelty or cancellation. We want human beings who can tell the difference between a life well spent and a life merely filled with distraction.
If we step back and view this through the widest possible lens, the stakes here are astronomical. We often treat education as just a municipal logistical issue, like what happens in the building down the street between 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. so parents can go to work.
Childcare with math attached.
Exactly. But education is so much more than that. Education is the mechanism by which a civilization hands itself to the next generation.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, yes. It hands over not just its mathematical formulas and its technical skills, but its deepest, most profound convictions about what is real, what is true, what is good, and what people are actually for.
And if we fail to do that,
if our society reaches a point where we can build incredible, world-altering machines, if we can build AI that maps the human genome and writes philosophy essays in 4 minutes, but we can no longer answer those moral questions with any shared conviction, then we have lost the one thing we most needed to pass on.
we've lost our inheritance.
We will be technological giants and moral infants.
Wow. Let's recap the intense journey we've been on today. We started by looking backward at a system that used to have a spine, a system focused on forming human beings by forcing them to wrestle with the 4 essential questions of reality, humanity, knowledge, and purpose.
Right.
We saw how abandoning those messy questions for the sake of efficiency led to the dangerous myth of the neutral classroom.
And nature abhors that vacuum.
From there, we traced how that vacuum was filled by 3 toxic patterns. The factory, which turns students into economic cogs. The mirror, which traps them in the lonely isolation of their truth. And the smuggler, which quietly programs them with unexamined assumptions.
And we examine the heavy toll those patterns have taken. A generation facing a crisis of loneliness, a loss of overarching meaning, and a public square devoid of the moral vocabulary needed to navigate disagreement.
A completely fractured society.
We saw how artificial intelligence is currently exposing the absolute bankruptcy of an education built purely on producing outputs. But finally, we explored the restorative framework of love, light, and life.
A return to genuine human encounter, the humble pursuit of objective truth, and the explicit formation of character, which is already taking root in a quiet but powerful counter movement.
It's an inspiring path forward.
I want you, the listener, to think back one last time to that college sophomore. The girl sitting alone at midnight in the library, bathed in the glow of the screen, swapping out 2 words on an AI-generated essay about a concept of justice she doesn't actually understand.
Yeah.
She deserved so much better than that. She deserved better than a system that treated her like a defective machine that could be easily replaced by a better machine. She deserved a teacher who knew her name and cared about her soul.
She deserved a real guide.
She deserved a rich tradition to stand on. She deserved a question worthy of her whole attention and her whole intellect. She deserved an education that treated her as a human person capable of discovering truth, not just a producer of correct outputs. And so do our children.
The human inheritance wasn't permanently destroyed, it was only set down. And what one generation sets down in confusion, another generation can choose to pick back up.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. We've talked a lot about the threat of artificial intelligence, but consider this twist, building on everything we've unpacked today.
Okay?
If artificial intelligence can now perfectly mimic the soulless, standardized outputs of the factory pattern, and if social media algorithms can perfectly echo the flattering, subjective opinions of the mirror pattern, might the terrifying, disruptive rise of AI actually be the exact forcing function humanity needed to accidentally save the soul of education?
That is a fascinating question.
If the machines can do literally everything else, if they can write the code, draft the essays, and pass the bar exam, maybe the only thing left for our schools to teach is how to be human. Keep seeking truth, keep asking the deep questions, and we will catch you next time on The Deep Dive.